In this video, we want to discuss the relationship between youth athletes training for strength in sport as they go through their development and not training. And we want to dispel some of those rumors and myths that you may have heard over the years about introducing young athletes to weights and strength training early versus later in their development. Before we get too deep into the topic, Legends of Athletics is offering online training. This is my shameless plug. We do offer online training for young athletes as well as older athletes at a fair price. I feel like it's a fair price of $35 a month. We develop and write out a whole programming system. Even if you're returning to sport from injury, we also have programs for that as well. We do write custom programs for that as well, depending on the injury. And so make sure you go and visit legendsofathletics.com and be legendary. I want to reference a study first. And if you're over the age of 30, 40, for sure, you have heard a lot of the rumors and the claims that strength training early in sport is bad for the athlete, especially athletes that are prepubescent or haven't hit their teenage years yet. You have heard that this is bad on athletes as far as like damaging growth plates, causing some bone deformities, not allowing the athlete to grow to their tallest potential, and things of that nature. You've also heard things as far as on the women's side that if they lift weights, they'll look bulky like men. They'll have the frame and size of men, but this is all based on hormones. So we want to take time over the next video or over the next few video series to talk about these things. In this video, we're going to stay down and stay focused on the youth side of things. We're going to stay down and stay focused on the youth side of things. And so this kind of like the rumors and myths and things like that started in the 1970s, but those things were dispelled in the mid 1980s and so on, as more studies have come to show the positive effects of strength training in youth sports. Things such as boosting self-esteem, making you feel better about your body, producing more force production, being better at your sport because of the strength that you're able to put on display. And so it can be done. It just has to be done in a safe and effective manner pre-teen. And then as you go through your teenage years, we can ramp up different things and different metrics to make this even better than it was before. And so we want to dive into that. And the first thing I want to say is these are my principles for an effective youth training program as far as in regards to sports performance and helping athletes be overall better. For a lot of my athletes, I have done strength training. We do strength training for a lot of my athletes that are under 13 years old, but we just do it a little differently and in an effective manner. So when it comes to, first of all, like loading spines, we want to master movement basics before putting an external load on the spine. And this is things such as like back squats, deadlifts, and things of that nature. You will never see me as of now today do those things. If I do them, there's not going to be a whole lot or just, if at all. And so, I'm very careful with the spine because you only get one back. And there are a lot of grown people who deal, and I'm trying to make sure I say my words carefully and correctly. There are a lot of adults that deal with back issues and they deal with chronic back pain and issues of that nature just due to incorrectly loading the spine. Or like me, for instance, I started lifting weights in 8th grade, but I did some damage to my C-spine just based on not being well versed in weightlifting. And a lot of times whenever we go into team setting and team atmospheres, there isn't a whole lot of, teaching and learning how to lift weights and master the lifts and movement patterns before just full on diving into it, doing maxes and things of that nature. Nothing wrong with that if your school does that, but just for the context to paint a picture, those are things that we see commonly that damage youth athletes as far as, their progression through sport, their progression through their athletic careers. And so naturally we will have to lift weights at some point because everyone, I think once you get to high school level and up, you do lift weights and you participate in some sort of weightlifting program. But it's also just a matter of like, how do you do these things efficiently to where as the load increases, we don't increase our risk of injury because we've been doing something incorrectly this whole time anyway. And that's like the biggest thing that you see across the board in high school, middle school, high school, across the board, and it's not anyone's fault. These are just things we have to learn and take into consideration. The primary benefits that we see is increased strength, local muscular endurance, again, sports performance, tissue strength, and tolerance, meaning we're able to store more energy and produce more energy in things such as like our Achilles tendon, foot and ankle strength. These are the principles that I like to live by when it comes to training youth athletes in the weight room. And if you see me looking down, looking at my notes, first of all, I want to master the basics. So mastering the basics for me is mastering those movements, like my calisthenics movements. So push-ups, air squats, air lunges, things like that. Things that require no weight. I just want to see you master the movement, have command over the movement, and then be able to manipulate the movement as you see fit, or as we program into what we're doing. So the first thing we want to do is master those movements. Whenever you see a kid that produces or is able to produce a lot of strength, you see them being able to be in control of every plane of motion and movement that they are in or put in. And one thing that you see that's lost, especially after puberty, is athletes lose the ability to command every plane and range of motion, whether that's due to growth, whether that's due to muscle tightening, or what have you. Like, you just lose the ability to command all those areas, and that's where sports performance or working with a private coach comes into play in order to have you in the best position possible, because we have to be in control of those things. Mastering calisthenics, to me, is a very basic principle to having a great program, because even when I introduce weights into the program, we're still going to have some calisthenics-based movements in there, because you can't get enough of those. And using weights is fine, but you can also get too deep into the waters of weights to where you only depend on those and you lose the ability to control your own body. If you want to see what I mean, case in point, go to your local high school and ask anybody. You can ask your strongest guy in the weight room to perform 10 to 20 push-ups without stopping, without breaking, and very few can do it. Trust me, I've tried this over the years. This is anecdotal and not anything that's been scientifically studied or based, in my opinion. These are things I've just noticed and monitored over my own time. The second thing we want to do is monitor the athlete. There's nothing worse when you're introducing youth athletes to strength training than not monitoring the athlete, leaving the athlete to their own devices. Yes, as they get stronger and they get better, and you are safe and feel comfortable and trust that athlete, depending on what movement they're doing, you can leave them by themselves without having to monitor them so close. But when you're beginning to start and introduce this athlete, you do need to monitor them a lot, just because naturally they're kids and they are learning how to be stronger. They're learning how to be more athletic. And so things that you won't have to monitor a lot once they figure it out is things like push-ups and air squats and lunges. Now, what you will have to do, because they are kids, is you will do a lot of cueing. And the cueing that you do will be subtle reminders of correct positioning. For whatever reason, just young athletes in general, until they get older, just always lack like remembering their body positioning or remembering where they should be as far as like positionally to execute the movement correctly and safely in a great manner. And so then from there, number 3 is have appropriate equipment. Don't have a 4 foot or barely 4 foot tall, not even 100-pound athlete bench pressing off of a high school bench. That's crazy. That's insane. It's asinine. The best thing you can do is, either one, stay away from it if you don't have a smaller bench that's appropriate. So meaning their feet can touch the ground, like not the toes, but their foot can literally touch the ground, and they have a rack the appropriate size to feel safe and comfortable. Because you also have to take into account their vantage point. So they're with this big equipment, huge equipment around, and you're putting this tiny human and this tiny body inside of it. Like, they're not going to feel, one, psychologically comfortable, and two, physiology is going to take over, and they're going to want to protect themselves naturally, and you just can't put them in that position. So put them in a position of success. So have the appropriate equipment. For me, the only things you really need are bands, dumbbells, and maybe some kettlebells. And if you don't have kettlebells, you can always use the plates in replacement for those kettlebells. So have appropriate equipment. The next thing is be able to thoroughly communicate and demonstrate the desired movement correctly. Most kids are going to learn by you doing it first. You have to perform the movement in order for the athlete to know what the movement is, especially when they're younger. When they're older, yeah, you can get away with just talking through it. But when they're younger, you have to do it first. You have to demo and then let them execute. Demo, execute. Demo, execute. You can't just talk it through. Now, if you have an inability for whatever reason you can't do it, that's understandable. That's fine. But for the most part, you have to demonstrate every movement that you want them to do. And then as they're with you longer, they probably can figure out what you're talking about because y'all will understand each other's lingo and dialogue, and things like that through dialogue. But you can't start that way, just off the street, just saying, "Hey, I want you to do 6 kettlebell swings and then walk off." Like, that's crazy. Or just showing them the kettlebell swing, but then not saying, "Hey, remember I want your back here. I want your chest here. I want the kettlebell here." These are things you have to just go through. So it's not going to be a quick process where you just drop the person in, you demo, you tell them what it is, and then they go do it. Like, no, and we have to be safe in that process because they're learning. And so really what you're doing when you're working with the young athletes, you're doing the same thing with the older athletes, but especially with the younger athletes. What you're doing is you're programming and processing, putting you're hardwiring these things into that athlete's brain. And so once they get older, they're just going to demonstrate what they've already been hardwired to do as they've been coming to the ranks and learning. So we have to think of those things, and we have to keep those things front of mind. Not in mind, but front of mind. Next thing, don't overcomplicate the process. For the love of Christ, my brother and my sister in Christ, for the love of it, teaching a snatch, teaching a hang clean, a power clean, an overhead squat, those 4 for sure. Even a goblet, well, not a goblet squat for sure, not a goblet squat, but a split squat, rear leg elevated. Those things are actually hard to teach. Like, it's not like it's easy communicating it. It's hard in application. So to me, the Olympic lives with my young athletes. We are not year 1, no. Year 2, probably still a no. Year 3, we'll start, like, as we approach, as we get closer to puberty, we'll get closer to those athletic style lifts. So I'll teach you a hang clean at age 11 or 12. We'll go through a power clean at age 11 or 12. This is where equipment comes back into conversation. I'm not teaching you that with a 45-pound dumbbell either. A 45-pound barbell either. I'm teaching you that with, first we're going to go PVC pipe. This other thing, talking about equipment. I always start with a PVC pipe. And then we're gonna graduate to the bar that's age appropriate. So if this kid is under 100 pounds or under 120 and they're under 13 years old, I'm not using, if I can, more times than not, I'm not using a male bar. So I go with a female bar at most, which is not, I'm not saying male and female like that, but I'm saying like for the average Joe on the street. We'll go with a 15-pound bar or a 35-pound bar at max strength. Like, this kid is strong. They're displaying good strength. We'll go to a 35-pound bar. But we're not going to a 45-pound bar. One, the bar itself is probably too thick. 2, that's too heavy to adequately load and unload for that human being. This is what I mean, to take you a little bit deeper. 9 times out of 10, when these kids are around the older guys, or they see the high schoolers, or they see adults lifting weights, they are going to want to put some sort of weight on there. This is where I do love bumper plates. Bumper plates look heavier than what they are. So you can get a bumper. All right, so think about it. If you have an iron weight, your iron 5-pound weight is going to be about that, somewhere in there, about that big. You can get the same 5-pound bumper plate to be about, I'm going off screen, but you can get it to be about the size of a 45, like in circumference. Or is that diameter? I don't know. Anyway, you'll get the same size of a 45, but it'll just be lighter. And so this plays into the psyche of the young athlete. They just want to look like they're moving some big weight, or they want to look like, hey, I'm doing something kind of like the older people are doing. And so this creates fun. This creates more motivation to want to continue to do it versus demotivating and creating an insecurity to do it. So those are things we want to keep in mind. Then the next thing, not second, but the next thing is don't progress too swiftly. One thing you see trainers do, one thing we see people, just the average Joe do, we see the mountaintop and we take off sprinting in a dead sprint to it. They are going to get stronger over time. They are going to get leaner, maybe get a little more mass as far as like muscle mass. But even at the youth level, you're not going to pack on as much because you haven't gone through puberty. So you don't have the testosterone levels to pack on like crazy size and strength unless there's something else, another hormone in play. And so honestly, you have to be the adult in the room, and we have to progress at an appropriate speed and an appropriate time. Like, even though this person is getting stronger, you have to keep in the back of your mind, this is a child. You have to keep in the back of your mind, this is a kid. You got to protect the babies from themselves. You have to protect the athletes from themselves. Guess what? I got older kids that I have to protect from themselves. Like, it's nothing wrong with going and maxing your body out, maxing your strength out, but you also have to just be smart about it. And this is where it goes back to appropriate equipment, don't overcomplicate it, and then communicate, demonstrate, execute. And so that's the process. And if you mastered those movements, you know what to look for. Like if we done an air squat, then a PVC pipe squat, and then I just say I want to introduce it, we do a back squat. Well, I can judge depth. I can judge hang-ups as far as mobility hang-ups and things like that, all on the front end versus like being on the back end and saying like, I really don't know if that's a good squat for this kid. I really don't know if that's a bad squat for this kid. Because when I'm going through that process, I'm also looking at the ranges of motion limitations or lack thereof. So those are things I'm looking at. Then lastly, and most importantly, keep it fun. These are kids. We want to motivate them to stay with sport. We want to motivate them to that strength training and being an exercise is fun. That is something that's a part of you and not just something that you have to do for the sake of playing sports or the sake of being an athlete. But make this fun. In the process of getting better, as you get older, it's a hard process. But you have to make it enjoyable on that journey, which is why I always try to remind my athletes of enjoy the process and not the result. These are things that we have to do as trainers and teachers and coaches and family members. We have to do these things because those are the things that are important in order to make that athlete a success and to put them in position to succeed. If we don't keep it fun, we're only losing potentially great athletes, great team contributors and players and things like that. The weight room and things of that should be to promote competitiveness, but also create a better, robust, more game-ready athlete. We're not in there to discourage one another, to not be leaders, to not be able to do things that athletes do because maybe this person isn't as strong. Maybe they don't move as well. Maybe they're not as fast. Maybe they're not as quick. But we use these things as tools to make us better overall athletes. So we have to keep that in mind. And, one thing that I've just kind of been playing with the idea of is letting my warm-ups, where I used to run a warm-up, letting it be more player-led and player-focused, because what I've kind of noticed is, one, it promotes leadership, but also it promotes accountability for them, and it also lets them be involved in part of the process. And that's something that I just learned over the years in coaching. Like, it's great to have control. Like, of course, when I get a new athlete, if it's just us working, I'm going to control that process. But as they get better, just allowing them that freedom, because whenever they go to their teams or they go to their games or what have you, they're going to be by themselves. And so they need to know what to do pregame, kind of get themselves going, get themselves in the right headspace, because you're not going to always be there and unless you work for a team and stuff like that. But anyway, you're not always going to be there in that process, and so you want to make sure they're in the best position possible to be the best them possible and to show up as their best selves every day. That doesn't mean 100% every day, but to show up as their best selves every day. And so that's all I got. I hope y'all like the content. I want to do more as far as like the youth training and aspect of things. I know there's a few coaches out there that do stuff like this, but I just see it as a space that we can grow in and not be ignorant in. You know, a lot of times what you'll see is we do a lot of things on social media to get clicks and likes, but the basics never go out of style. Those are the things that keep athletes healthy, keep them available, and keep them ready to go. But we can't negate that for the sake of wanting to look cool or wanting to be, you know, the hottest thing under the sun. We got to teach and we got to have some people out here that's really teachers and movers and shakers and trying to help more people learn the real craft. And I'm not talking about just a clinic, but like really learn the craft and not just the surface level of everything. And so, again, if you like the content, like, share, comment, subscribe. Visit legendsofathletics.com if you want any more information. If you want to join any of our groups or whatever, go to legendsofathletics.com. And as always, be legendary.